The following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University. Hello everyone out there in radio land. It's really great to be back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. First time we've actually been on Wider's airwaves for quite some time. You might be listening to this on the internet also, which hopefully will be up a little bit before the broadcast on Wednesday. But that will be Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. If you're listening beforehand, please tell your friends. This is a very special episode of the program today. Now, as the tagline usually goes, we call out the establishment's bullshit. And on today's episode, we need to call out some bullshit that is right here in our backyard. Now, typically what we do week in and week out, we zoom in on issues at a local, statewide, national, and international level and give it our deft leftist analysis. As I've said before on the show, a bunch of hood rats who've read too much literature, news, just a little too smart for the establishment's liking. But today, we're going to do things just a little bit differently. On our show today, I'm not going to editorialize a whole lot, except maybe a little bit in this first chunk in the beginning. And mostly, I am just going to use this show as a platform for people who bore witness to the events of June 1st and June 2nd here in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Give them a platform to tell the truth. Because in the context of calling out the establishment on BS, here's who needs to be called out. Who needs to be called out? Local media, WWMT, the Kalamazoo Gazette, so on and so forth. For basically carrying water for the narrative that Kalamazoo Public Safety was putting out. Also, the local city government for lacking that transparency, for, again, just siding with the narrative that Kalamazoo Public Safety put out, and of course, the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety themselves. We will be playing a clip during this program of their statement, which, if you listen to the whole program, you listen to particularly our interviews from the events of June 1st, you will notice that they do not line up with what the police chief and the assistant chief said about that evening. So this is a very important episode in that context because we need to bring you the truth. And that's what this program today is going to be about, is providing that space for the people who saw what actually happened to tell that story. I'll start with myself. And I'm actually going to take it back before the most high-profile incidents occurred. I was an active participant and volunteer for the youth coordinated, or not youth coordinated, sorry, it was young folks, more college folks, sorry. I'm going to take it back to that evening, May 30th, Saturday, May 30th. It was the first big march here in Kalamazoo. Many of you probably participated in it downtown. Several hundred people showed up. It was a very impressive event, and my hat's off to the organizers for being able to hold it down and be so well coordinated with so many people coming out. Before the event started, I was walking people through some general safety tips, and it did come up what to do if at some point they deployed tear gas and rubber bullets. We had that discussion, and after that, somebody came up to me and asked me a question. How likely do you think it'll be that the city of Kalamazoo actually uses things like tear gas and rubber bullets? My response was not very likely. Things like that generally don't happen in Kalamazoo. Specifically, I said we're a pretty small town, and bad PR is a powerful weapon, a powerful stick, if you will, here in this city. It's not necessarily untrue, but it definitely did not prepare me for what would end up happening on June 1st and 2nd. But even on May 30th, Saturday, May 30th, I did notice an interesting and very unique and novel interaction between Kalamazoo protesters and the police. It's the first time I could recall ever seeing Kalamazoo police officers in elevated gear. I'm calling that for a specific reason. It was either Kalamazoo Public Safety or the city, basically being very specific about how that's not technically speaking riot gear. But I'll just say, for the layperson who was down there that hot afternoon, there's about 9 to 12 officers in riot gear. Essentially what happened, the crowd had stopped at the corner of the Kalamazoo Mall in West Michigan. Off at the corner of the crowd, kind of towards the western end of West Michigan, there was a police SUV. The crowd was around it. As far as I could tell, they were not actively engaging or touching it or trying to destroy it in any sense, but they were around it. This is true. The reaction coming up from the east side of Kalamazoo, actually going the wrong way down the one-way, were two white police vans, and out came the police in this riot gear that, frankly, they didn't look super comfortable in. I would describe it as looking at kids with oversized Halloween costumes. And they came towards the crowd. And they went into the crowd and started pushing and jostling. I saw several water bottles being thrown towards them. And I'll just pause real quick and say, those of you who've listened to the show for a long time know that I've been fairly transparent with my experiences out there in the field at escalated events. And for that moment, when I was witnessing them trying to push their way into the crowd through this vehicle, I thought, this is it. This is the moment where nice, quiet, peaceful, progressive Kalamazoo erupts. Through some luck and, honestly, the patience of the crowd, that did not end up happening. Although the police did push and shove and hit, to a certain extent, folks in the crowd. But, to their credit, they did not, the crowd, that is, did not let that escalate as it very easily could have. And I say that because of something that is going to be very apparent when you start listening to these testimonials and from my own eyewitness reports and the reports of others in this region. The one X factor that led to any sort of escalation from crowds in Kalamazoo over the weekend started with the police. The police escalated every time. In fact, you could also see this in the events in Grand Rapids. I won't be spending a lot of time talking about that, but I will mention I did go up to Grand Rapids after the march in Kalamazoo. Similar situation in Grand Rapids. Large crowd in front of the police station. Some folks were shouting. Some folks threw empty water bottles. Which again, there's been a lot of jokes made on the internet about why is it that police in, inches of protective gear are being set off by tiny pieces of plastic. But again, the police responded with tear gas, pepper rounds, rubber bullets in Grand Rapids. And that was the trigger. if you are one of those people who did a whole lot of hand-wringing about property destruction and looting that's occurred here in the Southwest Michigan area because of these protests, there's really one entity to blame: law enforcement. And I don't mean that in some sort of, manner where I'm exaggerating or I'm trying to make some sort of point. That is how the sequence of events went down. In Grand Rapids, when the police opened up with tear gas, rubber bullets, that is when the property destruction and the looting started. In Kalamazoo, on the evening of June 1st, multiple eyewitness accounts have painted a picture that the crowd was visibly agitated after the police pinned a black man to the ground in a manner not all that visually dissimilar than what happened to George Floyd. Some have reported that the destruction that was witnessed on the mall did not start until after the police tackled that man. We'll be talking about that specific incident later on in the program. There's a few other things I would like to mention before we get into the interviews proper. One, I'm going to start with something very personal. I posted this on the Facebook, and I think a lot of us out here in the community, some of us who are on the left, some of us who are maybe a little radical, maybe been to some of these intense situations, there's still something markedly different about it. I'm going to read from this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about collective trauma afterwards. I'm not usually one to talk about my emotions on the internet, and maybe some other folks are feeling the same way, but I've been crying every night since Tuesday. I don't cry much, not a macho thing or whatever, I just usually process in different ways. I've seen some stuff. When I talk about the police state, it's not just from what I've read in a book. I've seen people brutalized, even people gassed, all that. I thought I was desensitized to this stuff. Then last weekend, the long weekend, the one that lasted till Wednesday morning. The police state wasn't something where I felt compelled to go to the front lines to be helpful or something like that. My home was the front line. Many of you who know me know well that I take the concept of home deadly serious. I do get very defensive about Kalamazoo. The police state is here, and yes, while I was one of those people who always said, hey, don't let the progressive veneer fool you, the police state is here, it will be here. The police state fired on kids in my park. The police state fired on peaceful protesters in my streets. The city administration allowed war crimes on my people and my neighbors. I am mad and sad and tense, and I want my appetite back, and I want to sleep. And once again, to all the people who I told this was coming, I hate being right. Black Lives Matter. And to the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety, who took an opportunity to cosplay and unleash all their fun toys on our people, to the people in the city government who allowed it to happen, I see you, and I will not forget. I wanted to talk just a moment about that too. Collective trauma is real. Now, this will be published on Monday the 15th, and then broadcast again on Wednesday the 17th. We're about 2 weeks out from the original incident. Some of you may have found your own way to cope. Maybe it just doesn't feel as raw as it did. But I did want to put some advice out there nonetheless. The city has been through collective trauma, and not just those 2 days, but the days of arsons, suspicious arsons that followed, and a night where a family on the north side was terrorized by the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety, and where they actually engaged in quite a bit of property destruction themselves. It's been a week of trauma and terror for many folks in Kalamazoo, and even for those who are experienced, even those who've seen some stuff, it is very different when the police state is firing on people at the corner of Park and West Michigan. It's very different to see that kind of police brutality out in the open, naked, in our parks, in our streets, that we go down every single day. And I know it's a factor of white privilege. Many of us aren't constantly concerned and thinking about police terrorism. But this was the week for much of Kalamazoo that the police state hit home. If you are having trouble eating, make sure that you eat enough, even if you're not hungry. If you're not sleeping, make sure you access a sleeping aid, melatonin, or Zzzquil, what have you. Do appropriate and proper self-care, especially if you were down there on Monday, June 1st, or Tuesday, June 2nd. Speaking from experience, this stuff will give you PTSD. Do what you need to do to take care of yourselves. I also want to mention, and this is very important too, as of the date that I will be putting this, uploading this online, there is a city commission meeting tonight at 7 p.m. Please definitely tune into it. It is going to be a virtual meeting, but there will be a space for public comment. If you so choose, if you are so inspired, please try to make it down. And in that light, one thing I also told folks is, in the reaction to the city's overreaction, in the reaction to the police's overreaction, and the issues of systemic racism that have existed for long before the Kalamazoo Public Safety Department used riot weapons. Acknowledging that reality, and in this spirit of the necessity of following Black organizers and the needs of the Black community, I want to read this. It's a list of demands from PACT. Those of you who don't know, PACT is a local board that works on pursuing equity in the Kalamazoo public school system and eliminating racial inequities and systemic discrimination. If you do decide to tune into that meeting, have some comments, please let these demands guide you. Their demands are immediately that KDPS will cease the use of tear gas or other chemical weapons, that KDPS will cease the use of riot gear or other provocative dress while interacting with the public, that KDPS will wear body cams at all times, always on an unobstructed part of their uniform. Kalamazoo City Commission will order an independent investigation into KDPS response to public protests beginning May 30th. KDPS will provide a weekly public briefing on the progress of their own investigations into police conduct related to public protests beginning on May 30th. Within 2 weeks, KDPS will develop an ongoing plan for quarterly reporting to the public of all complaints against the departmenteur, its officers, and the resolution of each. And within 3 months, all KDPS officers who interact with the public will have participated in racial healing circles with members of the community led by trained facilitators, and KDPS will adopt a policy requiring its officers live within the boundaries of the area the department serves. So again, that city meeting will be Monday, June 15th at 7. The following is a testimonial written by Kalamazoo resident and organizer Matt Leckel. He describes the events that he witnessed on the night of June 1st. This is from a Medium article that he wrote and published on June 2nd called "What I Saw in Downtown Kalamazoo Last Night Was Police Violence." After hearing reports from both the City of Kalamazoo Police Chief and the Kalamazoo County Sheriff that there were credible threats of violence and looting in downtown Kalamazoo yesterday, I went downtown to see what was going on. I rode my bike downtown at 4 p.m., pretty much empty and silent. Rode my bike through downtown at 9:30 p.m., pretty much empty and silent. A few dozen protesters remained at the corner of Michigan and Rose. Completely peaceful and powerful protest happening. At 10:30 p.m. or so, I started to walk from my house to downtown. As I get back downtown to Michigan and Rose, there were still a handful of protesters, totally peaceful. What's new to the situation is a band of cars circling around downtown, around Bronson Park, cutting through Academy behind the courthouse, just driving totally out of control. The wrong way, too fast, too close to people. Bizarre behavior. There are no police anywhere to be seen. This seems odd to me, especially given the police's warnings. The cars driving so recklessly seem out of place. Where are the police? I take a loop around downtown Kalamazoo, through Bronson Park to the Kalamazoo Mall. It is quiet and mostly empty. Still really bizarre and dangerous car traffic buzzing all around downtown and honking though. So it would be quiet, and then a band of cars would honk and drive through, and then quiet again. Not a lot of people on the mall walking at all. While on the mall, I saw a van full of 4 white dudes, out of state plates. They were creeping slowly down the mall. They rolled down their window. "Black Lives Matter, you're with us or you're against us." They bust out laughing and drive off. I immediately think, that did not seem right. Something's amiss here. I ran into my friend Kat and another friend of hers who also saw the van and said they tried to snap a photo of the license because the dude seemed so creepy. I say this not to say that there was only vans and trucks of white dudes downtown, but there was. At least at 10:30 to 12 p.m. or so, a bunch of trucks and vans full of white dudes downtown circling around. I saw them myself. Who were these folks? I also see 2 large unmarked white vans driving around downtown. I had heard rumors from the police of busfuls of people coming to incite violence, and I wonder if these are vans or that. At 10:45 p.m., I'm headed home. At the edge of downtown, I see this tweet about broken windows at the courthouse. Seems suspicious. I was just at the courthouse. People were not looting or breaking windows there. That one flyer, come on, man. And this is Andy. I'm just going to do a quick little aside. If you haven't seen the picture, it was basically like a little note, kind of like rock thrown through the window type thing. And if you see an image of it, it just kind of looks like something a right-winger or some sort of agent provocateur would come up with. It's kind of hard to describe without seeing it, but I will link to it when I publish this online. Back to Matt's article. I walk back to the courthouse. I arrive at the courthouse literally 4 minutes after this tweet was posted. It's mostly quiet. Still, some protesters on the southwest corner of Michigan and Rose. In fact, besides cars driving absolutely out of control around the courthouse, things seem pretty calm. Protesters are just doing their thing. There are no police anywhere to be seen. I'm thinking, if someone just threw a brick through the window of the courthouse, and the police have been waiting for violence in downtown all day, where are the police? Things simmer for a few minutes. I'm watching these cars just drive through downtown honking, some circling around, going the wrong way. Really bizarre and scary behavior. There's all sorts of people in the cars, definitely some people protesting, and definitely a bunch of something else. No police anywhere. What happens next is 3 police SUVs pull over a Suburban with black folks in it. I'm standing on the opposite side of Michigan in front of the courthouse. Where the police pull over the SUV is on the north side of Michigan Avenue, just west of Rose. This is literally directly across the street from the only real contingency of protesters in downtown currently. It's directly in front of the only business that had boarded up on Michigan Avenue. This is a very weird spot to decide to pull someone out of a car. Pretty clear what's going to happen if you pull someone out of a car directly in front of a protest about police violence, isn't it? The police then proceed to pretty violently pull a black man from the car and violently throw him to the ground. I'm thinking, what in God's name are the police thinking? Are they trying to start something? This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. It's hard to believe they would be so stupid. A crowd begins to gather around the incident as people watch at least 6 police struggle and pin down a black man. People start to yell at the police. This all happens within about 2 minutes. Next thing I know, I see the large unmarked white vans pull up. Are these the looters? The van doors bust open and no, it's the police in riot gear. They run up to the crowd and start macing people. Another thing happened during all this. There's literally trucks full of white guys rolling by the scene, stopping traffic to take videos. They're hanging out of their cars, almost gleeful. I have a few pictures of this, although not great quality as it was at night and pretty hectic. From there, I watched downtown descend into chaos. Cars started driving even more wild. Lots of people were justifiably upset at the unnecessarily violent behavior by the police. The police ramped things up and started getting even more violent. My friend Matt has a couple-hour video documenting his perspective on what went down. You can see for yourself a lot of what went on. That is Matt Milzarek, one of his videos. We will put it in the show notes. I don't know what would have happened last night if the police hadn't provoked violence, but I do know that the police provoked and caused violence in downtown Kalamazoo last night. What they did was unnecessary and harmful and almost seems as if they wanted to start a fight. I also want to be clear that I'm not trying to minimize anyone's justifiable rage, especially black folks, by pointing out what I believe to be white supremacists mixing into the scene and stoking things up in the hours leading up to what happened. People have a right and reason to be enraged and protest. It was a really complex situation, and I'm still processing what I witnessed, but I wanted to share my experience alongside what the news and the police stories said. Black Lives Matter, defund the police.
This is Andy Argo from the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. We're joined by another individual who was down there during what happened on Monday night. I want to welcome back some of you who are longtime listeners of the show might recognize Joe Von Head. He's a local housing advocate. What we're doing as part of this series, Joe Von, we're really just trying to collect stories and eyewitness reports of people who were down there during particularly Monday and Tuesday. So I want to start real quick with there was again reports earlier in the day of county closed down, potential outside agitators, etc. Things looked pretty calm going into 9-10 p.m. And then things started to shift. So could you tell the listeners at home kind of where you were that night when you heard that things were escalating downtown, and kind of what the scene looked like when you got down there?
So let me frame it. So I live downtown, and so I was aware of the potential rioting all day. Local business owners and leaders had already started boarding up windows on the Kalamazoo Mall. There was a text message that went out to quite a few people. The county warned its folks and told them to vacate county buildings and to go home early in case. The courthouse started to board up a few doors, and I was downtown during the whole time. This was around 4 p.m. After that, I noticed that there was some protests going on, peaceful, by a couple different groups. One was a religious group, and they were holding a prayer vigil in front of the courthouse. I stopped by, participated, and then kept walking around and just getting vibes that people were seemingly peaceful. They didn't understand why there was this whole agitation by business owners boarding up their windows and boarding up their doors. There was nothing on any of our radio waves that were going by us saying that there was going to be a riot. You know, riots aren't normally planned. They aren't normally organized like that. So I was surprised. And so at about 9 o'clock, I was still downtown. A few cars started rolling around. These were local individuals in cars. Some of them were rental cars. And they were beeping their horns at the folks standing in front of the courthouse in support of BLM. A little while later, some folks started coming back down and I guess congregating in front of the courthouse, and people just had signs or throwing up fists and being very cordial. Nothing that's so out of the ordinary. At about 10 o'clock, a car gets pulled over in front of the courthouse across the street, actually. And I noticed some sort of commotion was happening. It looked unusual, of course, given the times and what's happening now. I took it upon myself to go across the street from the courthouse where I was sitting to film this incident. I get around and I see that there's a black man being arrested and that there's a knee on his back. And there's 4 other officers, I think about 4 other officers or so, surrounding him. Not too long after that, people were clamoring in the streets saying that this doesn't look right. And it wasn't bad optics for the KDPS. It just didn't look good what was happening. Soon after that, you had a couple white vans pull up full of police officers in tactical gear, readying themselves, marching down the street in order to protect the officers who were being arrested. So they formed a line in front of the officers, and that increased the agitation of the folks outside. They were then even more upset that the protest by the citizens was met with tactical geared officers and pepper pellet guns and pepper spray. And so after that, after they arrested the man, they then, to get him to the patrol car, they drug him because the man had went limp. He had decided not to comply in a way to make it easy for them to get him to the car. Whatever that may be, I don't know. But it was a display that just didn't look good. And so the folks out there were very upset, highly upset. Once they got the guy into the cruiser and gave the driver of the vehicle his license back, they decided to then vacate the premises as quickly as possible because they knew that their presence was adding this extra bit of pressure to everything. So not long after that, folks started then walking down the street, yelling Black Lives Matter, protesting, and doing what we were doing earlier, this time a little bit more agitated, this time a little bit more pointed, and this time blocking traffic because they were extremely upset. We were extremely upset. And so we started walking westbound on Michigan Ave, and that's when folks started coming in what the police call exhibition driving, which were just vehicles that were leading the way as we walked down the street in protest. And they were in protest as well. We get to the Shell gas station at the corner of Michigan and Westnedge, and that's when stuff starts breaking loose. The police, you see them walking down the street, they start pepper spraying, pepper pellet, gassing. There's folks at the actual dealership jumping on cars, doing sort of things like that. And that's when all...
Jovan, if, sorry, just interject one. So leading up to the use of police weapons, was there any sort of warning or, kind of caveat from the police? That
So,
they
yeah,
start using?
absolutely. So I'm getting to that. And so here's the thing that I found very odd, right? And there's multiple accounts of this, multiple videos of this that are uncut, that the police started using crowd control methods such as pepper spray, such as smoke apparatuses that were thrown, and pepper pellets that were shot at individuals without any provocation, without any notice, without saying that this is no longer a lawful protest or gathering. They simply started marching on folks to push them back without saying a word. And so some folks put their hands up, they were sprayed. Some folks stood, and some folks kneeled down, they were sprayed. They were pushing folks back. We were triaging folks as soon as possible to get this pepper spray out of their eyes. Everyone was being hit with the smoke and the residue, so we were moving back as fast as possible. And now the folks, the KDPS and the folks dressed in the tactical gear kept pushing the line without saying one word to us. They didn't tell us to leave. They didn't say that what we were doing was illegal. They said anything. We yelled words like we were being peaceful. They have our hands up. There's some folks that are being agitators, and that's it. And that's when they started pushing us back down Michigan Ave, eastbound, that's when people started throwing rocks at windows. That's when people started running through the streets, because they were meeting aggression with aggression. They were meeting agitation with agitation. And that was the origin of what happened.
Oh. Well, thank you, Jovan, and, that's definitely something I saw a lot over the weekend. We might be talking a little bit on the show. I'll just ask, after witnessing that, I was just asked, how late were you down there? Did you, what was the mood of the crowd after this kind of unprovoked action, from the police?
The crowd became multifaceted. There's multifaceted reactions, really. So some folks were agitated, some folks were begging for peace, some folks kneeled, folks ran, rightfully so, and left and flee for their lives. We didn't know how far the police would go. We didn't know if they would pull out rubber bullets. We didn't know what was going to happen. All we knew was that we had a force coming at us against folks that were unarmed, and we were caught in a bad place at a bad time. And I think since I was down there from the beginning to the end, I know for a fact that the police, almost every level, were not communicating with the protesters. They were not asking questions. They refused to be vocal. They were just following orders and being agitators themselves. That was not handled properly. There needs to be a lot of work done. And I want folks to know that this happened right here in Kalamazoo, Michigan. It happened with KDPS, a well-funded organization, an arm of our government. And I think we need to hold them accountable. The mood became incredibly raw at that moment. Folks didn't know what was happening. It was unexpected. We had never seen something like this on all the days of protesting from KDPS, this modern police department. So we were absolutely caught off guard. And this is where we're at right now. The next day we saw the aftermath of what that was. And I'm not talking about broken windows. I'm talking about National Guard troops in our city.
Yeah, and, excuse me. I wanted to ask, kind of the follow-up to the next day. There was that press conference at Kalamazoo Public Safety. I don't know if you got a chance to watch it or if you were down there. But again, the police pushed a particular narrative that didn't seem to jive up with a lot of eyewitnesses. I was just wondering if you could briefly speak to that, and if you haven't actually seen the press conference, we'll kind of like put a pin in that question. But I'm particularly interested if you heard the press conference. What surprised you about like the differences in the story, and in particular, how did you feel about kind of the narrative that Kalamazoo Public Safety was pushing?
So the narrative felt disjointed. It didn't jive complete with what MLive later reported on not too long after. So we saw that during the press conference they talked about outside agitators. They talked about folks. They talked about the police giving fair warning, which we saw that wasn't true. And they talked about a few other things, but I really want to hone in on the outside agitators thing because I think this is the point that folks really are interested in. Folks want to know if this was somebody from Kalamazoo. Well, I want them to point folks to the arrest that night and how many people were arrested from Kalamazoo.
This next bit, we're actually going to be looking at one of the articles that MLive put out. And it's notable because it gets the closest to actually trying to discuss some of the truth of what happened that evening. Much of our criticism that we've lobbied at Kalamazoo Gazette and the local news stations was an unwillingness to incorporate eyewitness testimonials from people on the ground that ran contrary to Kalamazoo Public Safety's narrative, which basically attempted to say that any and all use of police weapons was morally justified, and also tried to say, more or less, we only hit the bad people, the agitators, the looters, etc. Now, there are still problems with this article, and we're going to be talking about those. And I'm not going to read it in its entirety, but I thought this was very important, especially some of the information it gives to about a particular instigating incident that both Matt Leckel and Javon Head talked about on our program. Title of the article is Arrest of Protester Ignited Unrest Monday Night in Kalamazoo, Some Say. This is written by Ryan Boldry, published on June 6th. The arrest of one individual who was downtown protesting police brutality in the wake of George Floyd's killing is what led to numerous Kalamazoo businesses incurring damage that evening, according to some witnesses. Daniel Williams, whose girlfriend Tara Williams says is a positive stay-at-home father, was one of 6 people arrested and 3 people charged as a result of incidents that occurred late Monday and early Tuesday in downtown Kalamazoo. The arrests made were all a direct result of both peaceful protesting and vandalism that occurred June 1st and 2nd. All the vandalism occurred after Williams' arrest late Monday night, according to multiple sources. Williams was being arrested on 2 felony drug warrants while a lot of activity was occurring late Monday night, according to police. Court records show Williams was wanted for felony possessions of narcotics/cocaine under 25 grams. Kalamazoo Public Safety Assistant Chief David Boyson told MLive Williams had been also identified by officers as one of the main instigators advocating for violent protests, and had been posting on Facebook Live to get people to come downtown and join him. So let's go back real quick. I wanted to hone in on that particular paragraph from MLive about Williams' prior record. It has no actual relevance to the situation. And, while one could play devil's advocate, say they're just, responding or elaborating on the statement police gave them, that was also a bad faith argument from the police. As I'm about to read, the context of the situation has absolutely nothing to do with Williams' record. Daniel Williams himself has been painted not only in the article, but also by many communities as a stand-up member of the community. His prior record has zero relevance to this story, other than to paint a picture of Williams somehow deserving it This is something we observe a lot from mainstream media, particularly conservative media. And, you know, don't forget, even in a town as progressive as Kalamazoo, there is a baked-in institutional bias to basically listen to the city government and public safety's version of events. I'll go ahead and go on. Williams calls the Kalamazoo police one of the most racist ever in a post on his Facebook wall. And by the way, just as an aside, he's not wrong. As we reported on the show before, circa 2014, shortly after Ferguson, a report came out that showed that the department actually had more institutional racial bias than Ferguson, Missouri. Going back to the article, Williams can be heard speaking about racial inequities in the community and how black people don't have the same opportunities in Kalamazoo as others. Williams also encourages people to participate in a motorcade, come downtown and protest, and get to the voting booth, vote out Kalamazoo County Prosecutor Jeff Getting, as well as select judges. He also chants at one point, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, racist police gotta go." At another point in one of the videos, Williams says, "Don't burn y'all community down, you'll regret it, do not do it." Williams' final video that night is a short clip in which he and his friends are standing on the sidewalk downtown when the police get out of multiple cruisers and come to arrest him. Williams, who's charged with resisting arrest, can be seen in Jovan Head's video being held down by 3 officers and then being taken down the sidewalk to a police cruiser with his knees dragging on the ground. One officer can also be seen in the video with his knee on Williams' back, which upset those present, and as Head says, instigated some of the unrest that followed. No property was destroyed prior to the arrest of Williams. According to both Head and officers, Williams went limp on officers at the time of the arrest. Head's video and others of the incident have circulated around social media, leading many to comment on the nature of how Williams was taken into custody. Some have been calling the man's arrest violent, inexcusable, and aggressive. When asked about public perception in regard to the arrest, Boysen replied by saying, "I'm not sure what you mean by aggressive arrest." Of course, they don't. And then it goes on to talk about the police point of view and them trying to justify what they did. If you want to hear that, please by all means read the full article. I'm going to skip that part. After Williams was arrested, protesters created a line and pushed back against police that were in riot gear, Head said. Once police eventually left, Head said that it is when he witnessed windows begin to get smashed. Williams' godmother, Tonya Pratt, was also downtown when the incident occurred. Pratt said not only did all of the violence occur after Williams' arrest, but she claimed some of the business windows were broken as a result of the police shooting rubber bullets. Pratt stated she did not understand why police had to drag Williams down the sidewalk. She said once officers got him to the police cruiser, he was taken away. Multiple officers helped him to his feet to get into the car. Pratt said it didn't make sense that they couldn't do that to get him up initially. Pratt was angry, she said, stating her godson had suffered from chronic back pain for 15 years after suffering a gunshot wound in the back when he was 23. Pratt said, in addition to pain being inflicted on Williams' back during the arrest, his wrist was also injured while he was being pulled and dragged down the street. Police came to a peaceful protest in riot gear, she said. What we're protesting is a black man dying after a knee being put in his neck, and they want to put a knee in Danny's back? Are they trying to kill the next black man? And again, I do want to give kudos to the author of this article for really trying to get multiple sides of the story with some critiques in mind. But that is a very important depiction of the events.
Hello.
Hello. So this is Andy Argo. I'm the host of the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. Just calling up because, or just Wanted to do that interview about the events you bore witness to last week.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So just starting out, you were there for the events that transpired on Monday night. Is that correct?
Yep.
All right. So I want to just kind of walk through like your just kind of your experiences when you were down there. So I'll just start with when did you hear that things were going on downtown? Were you there beforehand, or did you hear that things were escalating and then kind of made your way down?
Earlier in the day, I had got a notification that potential people from out of town were going to be in town to potentially start trouble. I come from a security background. I've been doing security for almost 20 years, so I honestly went down there after hearing that to try to protect the city as much as I could, try to steer people away from breaking stuff. That was my main thing. I support the Black Lives Matter movement completely, but that night particularly, I was down there to try to kind of be a peacekeeper between both sides and to make sure the town didn't get smashed up.
All right, and so you heard about that ahead of time. About what time did you get downtown?
I think it was right around maybe 9 o'clock is when I showed up. We had seen some events happening around the area of police and large amounts of cars going from spot to spot. So we were just kind of tracking around that, and then we seen that downtown had a lot of people starting to meet up at Bronson Park. So once we seen that, we kind of made our way over there and wanted to protest with them and kind of see what was going on. By the time we got there, they had already actually had pepper sprayed a gentleman. He seemed to be about in his mid-40s or so. I'm not 100% sure what that was over, but that was what we seen once we arrived on scene.
Okay, and so coming in at about 9 o'clock, before we break down what actually happened when the police started to escalate, I was wondering if you could speak to any of the reports. You know, it's a complicated narrative about outside agitators, local people. I'm also kind of upset, but as far as we got a lot of eyewitness reports of out of state vehicles, people from out of town, people not being able to apparently navigate our system of one ways particularly well. Just to your knowledge, while you were down there, did you notice that sort of element as far as in traffic and the protesters that evening?
Yeah, we've seen the couple people we talked to that were a little bit younger and were not familiar for us. They actually said they were from out of town. They didn't tell us where they were from, but we had asked them if they were from here, and they had said no, and their intentions were nothing but to destroy. At one point, one of them said, F peace, we're not here for that. So we definitely did see some out-of-town elements. It didn't seem like there's too many people from Kalamazoo that were partaking in some of the more disruptive behavior. Mm-hmm. But I know one of the girls that ended up being arrested that night was actually from Muskegon also, so...
Okay. So a picture that seems to be kind of emerging from these protests, and I'm wondering if you can kind of help speak to it. So from the reports I'm getting, there was kind of like these peaceful contingents in front of the courthouse over in Bronson Park. There was also, property destruction along the mall and some other parts of town. From what you could tell, as we kind of move along into the incident with the use of police weapons, what did you see with the crowd? How was the police engaging with them? I know in their press conference the other day they said they were outnumbered something like 50-1. What did it look like from your perspective when you were down there downtown before the police started using riot weapons?
It looked very peaceful. It definitely was not 50-1. I would say at most it was 2-1, and that's giving them benefit of the doubt. As far as the way they handled that situation with their riot police, I noticed they would drive from one end of the park to the other, or about a block away. And as people would kind of move around, they would cut them off and then start engaging them with their chemical weapons and whatnot. So they were kind of antagonistic. They never really showed any signs of trying to be peaceful, I would say, honestly. There's an incident, I'm sure we'll...
Police, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. There definitely was a couple people starting to break stuff at one point, and in one of the videos I've seen, they went out of their way and said, no, that's not what we're here for. You guys need to stop. That's not what we're here for. This is not about that. So there's people trying to police themselves, and they were getting it done for the most part. You can't control everything, obviously. Neither could the police. So I understand that, but once we kind of got them under control, there was just a show of force on behalf of the police that probably could have went multiple different ways, just showing a sign of understanding of why people were there, honestly.
So just, and this is just a very specific point, do you recall them, the police that is, warning the crowd or, telling the crowd that they were going to use these weapons?
No, there was no warning. I was there during the press conference when they addressed that and said that they used a warning, but no, there was never a warning at any point in time that they used those before using them. There was no warning. They kind of just marched as soldiers, did not speak to us, and then opened fire with their weapons.
Okay. What was the scene like down there in the park when they unleashed those weapons? And I know this is kind of a difficult part to talk about because, anybody who's been part of that knows there's a little bit of trauma involved. But, particularly we've got a lot of reports of, especially younger locals on scene who might have been hit by these weapons. But what did you witness as the police escalated?
I've seen a lot of innocent people yelling, we're here on peaceful protest, and then getting assaulted. At one point, personally, I had my hands in the air, and I was saying, I am here on peaceful protest. I'm not here to hurt you. I don't want to hurt you at all. And as I put my hands in the air, they point blank hit me with their mace. It really didn't seem to faze them what your intentions were at that point. They were there to do one thing, and they were going to execute it no matter what. There was no talking. They wanted to use those weapons, and they did. I rinsed out a 15-year-old boy's eyes because he couldn't see, and he was just walking around with one of his buddies. I did see a group of kids start to break stuff, and honestly, I don't think one of those guys even got hit with a pepper spray or anything. It's just mainly the peaceful protesters that were kind of standing there and having their hands up took the brunt of it, and the people that were actually breaking stuff and moving around, the police really didn't seem to try to chase those people and actually do anything about those people.
All right, and I know you listened to the press conference the next day from Kalamazoo Public Safety. I know I touched on this a little bit beforehand, but what do you think? What were some of the biggest differences between their official story and what actually happened there in the park that night? Because I know there was a lot of tension down there when people seemed like they were trying to kind of paint a different picture of how things went down.
Yeah, they tried to paint a picture of, they did a very good job, and the way they handled it was very professional. When you have 8 or 9 people laying belly down and their hands are up and you open fire on them, you could have peacefully taken those people into custody and there would have been nobody getting hurt, and those people had already given up. But he chose to open fire. So the way they say, they had no choice and they chased these people, those people had laid down and given up and they were ready to be peacefully arrested, and instead they were assaulted by police officers. So no, the way they painted that picture, I really don't agree with. I know it's a hard decision to make. You know, I've never put myself in a position to have to make decisions to attack other people and whatnot. So I know it's a hard decision, but as far as being peaceful and having a peaceful way of doing things and being peace officers, I feel like they probably could have just detained those people rather than opening fire on them while they were face down, belly down, and arms up.
Now, I'm just going to kind of close this out. I don't want to keep you all day, and I really do want to thank you for taking the time to speak your truth on the show. As the event escalated, you know, if you could kind of describe how things proceeded after that. I don't know how long you stuck down there, or if, you know, perhaps you got hit with any of those weapons yourself. But how did the crowd react after the police escalated?
There's a lot of screaming and terror, honestly. I heard a lot of females just screaming, why does this keep happening? It felt very dramatic, honestly. It felt very tense and dramatic. I know at one point the protesters asked the police, you know, if you take a knee, we'll leave now. And then, you know, they denied that, and it just kind of lit another fuse for people. So it was a terrible scene. It was scary. I got hit with the weapons a couple times. Not cool. Does not feel good. But, you know, I was there. I knew that was a possibility of being there because, you know, you got to take a stand for what you believe in. And I really wanted to make sure our town was not going to get destroyed. So, yeah, it was a pretty traumatic scene, and it was sad to see that happen to everyone, really.
Well, I'm just going to leave you with one last question. You know, moving forward, you know, I feel like, again, there needs to be some accountability, and, you know, I don't think the police department has been completely honest with what they did on Monday and Tuesday night. What would you like to see moving forward, you know, for the city and the Kalamazoo Police Department to actually address this in a real way, instead of either trying to kind of lie it off or, you know, engage in symbolic concessions?
Honestly, the way I'd like to see a change is maybe get these guys to learn some sympathy training and just kind of learn how to talk to people on a more personal level with the community. I don't think we need to use chemical weapons towards people. I would like to see that gone, honestly. The Geneva Convention banned that in 1925, I believe, and said it was, you know, not right for warfare. So these are unarmed civilians having that happen to them, and they're not trained for this. So I would like to see that gone, and I would like to see the police just be honest, be real with us, you know, be accountable for what you did. You messed up. It's okay. No one's perfect, but the longer you lie and try to play it off like you didn't mess up, it's going to infuriate people. And if we can't trust you, you know, you're not going to be able to trust us, and that's what we learned from a young age, you know. If you can't trust somebody, you know, why would they trust you back? So they've shown no trust in us. So until they trust us, you know, it's going to be a stigma.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to participate in this interview. And for those of you out there listening, be careful and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Hello. Again, this is Andy Argo from the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. We're going to do another interview about the events that took place over last weekend here in Kalamazoo, Michigan. We're joined today, our interviewee today, they wish to remain anonymous, but they were on site during the events that happened on Monday. So we're just going to go ahead and start with that. And I'm going to ask, you know, when did you first get down there? What prompted you to get downtown on Monday night?
Yeah, so, thank you very much. I was chilling with a friend in the Vine neighborhood. We were just all on the porch. Everyone was very apprehensive. We were also there on Saturday and we were actually towards the front of the line when the police dashed through the crowd and then retreated promptly afterwards. So everybody was on edge, and we were just kind of, chilling, not doing much on the porch. And somebody opened up their Snapchat, and on the Snap map, I don't know if you know, it shows where there's activity. And there was a lot of activity downtown, so we clicked on it, and there was traffic that was being blocked and protesters and stuff. So we decided to actually go out there. The post on Snapchat, the last thing up was at 10:30. We probably got there around 11:15, 11:30. And yeah.
Okay. So you arrived in the park at 11:15, 11:30. Paint us a picture. What was the scene down there when you arrived?
Well, we walked from the Vine neighborhood, and the first thing off the bat, everyone was very apprehensive, like I said, and the first thing that we really noticed were the sirens that were going off everywhere. We knew that Monday was actually the day that the sheriff shut down all the county buildings, and people were afraid of rioting. So the police were already amped up. There was already I couldn't even put a number on it, in the dozens of police officers in a 1 square block area, and they were just with their sirens on going around. And when we got down there, it was a very tense space. There were people in scattered crowds all over West Michigan. We walked up to right in front of the Kalamazoo County Courthouse, and there were people in clumps, large clumps, probably dozens of people floating around in different groups on different ends of the block, on different ends of the street. And there wasn't a lot of union. Everybody was kind of separated. Everybody was kind of scared. We were able to get into the crowd, or into a crowd out of the many that were there, and ask a few questions. And what had happened was there was protesters that were out, and I believe there's an MLive article on this now too. They were protesting peacefully. They weren't destroying anything. They weren't rioting. And the police came in and tackled a man very, very excessively. There was several of them that were on top of this guy, and they claimed he had a warrant, but it just really felt like they were just trying to attack the crowd and antagonize the crowd. And that's a scene that I walked into.
Yeah, I did notice just from the video footage, it almost looked a little bit like what happened to George Floyd. It seemed like very untactful way to arrest even somebody who was potentially dangerous, although the article paints a much different picture of this individual as being just kind of a peaceful observer. Pushing forward, so you noticed, the arrest happened, some agitation in the crowd. Between then and when, the police unleashed riot weaponry, how did the scene go down? What did you notice about the crowd reaction to that arrest?
So I wasn't there for the arrest, but the general sentiment in the crowd was that, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your show, but FTP. FTP. Yeah, so we were on the corner of Park and West Michigan, and there was police activity. There were cops around, all over the place. Everywhere you turned, you probably saw a cop. But there was a group of cops that got out of their cars down West Michigan, past Park, so towards Westnedge side, and they were walking in a squad formation, marching towards the crowd, and there was a lot of fear. People were running in each direction. Cops were...
Were they already in riot gear when they did that?
I cannot confirm. I believe they were already wearing armor, but I don't want to say yes for sure, because I don't remember. But yeah, they were all around. There was cops pulling up from every side. They had those jail vans out again, those big white E350s or whatever they are, the big vans that they take people away to jail in, and those were floating around. So everybody was scared, and everybody was running in different directions because cops were just moving around, harassing the crowd, more or less.
So were you there at that moment when they started using munitions on the crowd?
Yes. So what happened was, all of a sudden, this jail van pulled up with a lot of quickness. Cops hopped out of the jail van, all in their riot gear. They got in their lines, they started pushing the crowd back, and then all of the scattered crowds that were around all gathered into one. And they were able to push the police back, and they walked the police all the way back to, they went down a block to the Shell gas station that's on Westnedge and West Michigan. And right there, I wasn't around the corner when this happened, but what I heard from my friends who were right there in front of it was that one individual hit a car after being antagonized for, hours by the police. And it was at the dealership. They smashed a car, and then all of a sudden the police started firing pepper spray and everything indiscriminately into the crowd. There was definitely pepper spray initially. I don't know if there was tear gas initially, but all of that did ensue later in the night. Our state representative did confirm that we do not have rubber bullets. So I believe a lot of the reports I was getting of people getting shot with things were actually pepper balls.
Yes.
So little balls that have like pepper spray in them and they blow up and they hurt a lot.
Yeah. Which, by the way, at close range can be just as dangerous, although rubber bullets are going to be a little bit wider along in circumference. Alright, so you're there that night, things are starting to pop off. As somebody who's observing this, about how long were you down there, and what was the crowd reaction when you started seeing them use these munitions?
So what I will say is that this was 100% escalation on the police side. I have been in tense situations before with people who are trained in de-escalation. I believe you, as part of your profession, have learned de-escalation techniques. I used to be an adult foster care worker, and we get similar training. And that's not at all what happened. They were just in there, they antagonized the crowd, and they kept antagonizing the crowd. And instead of arresting that one individual, they really just opened fire on the whole crowd. And this is when the pandemonium ensued. Everybody ran in different directions. A close friend of mine actually was right in the front. He was the first person to get pepper sprayed right, in the face. Almost at point blank. There's a video of it somewhere. It was kind of messed up. So everybody started running around. And this is when it really got crazy. This is when things got graffitied on, things started getting hit. It was because the crowd got antagonized, the crowd got attacked, and they didn't have any other way to retaliate.
Because before that, it was mostly just, from what I've heard, mostly just peaceful protesters in Bronson Park.
Yeah, it wasn't on Bronson Park. It was on West Michigan, so one block over from Bronson Park. But yeah, it was all peaceful. No one was even in the road until the cops came and started antagonizing people. At which point we started blocking traffic and, doing, just acting erratically because we were being chased by the cops. And it was really cool to see because people who were being stopped, I don't think there was one person who got stopped in traffic that was against us. A lot of them actually got out of their cars and joined the crowd. So that was really cool to see.
I guess, the next thing I'd want to ask, so, at the press conference the next day, the picture that Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety was painting for the general public was essentially, we were outnumbered 50-1, we didn't have a choice about elevating to these riot tactics. Could you speak a little bit towards, the narrative that KDPS is putting out versus what you actually saw?
Yeah, I actually want to go back a little bit. I missed one of your questions. I was out until 3 in the morning. And at that point, it felt like if we were going to stay out any longer, we might actually get physically hurt or die. So, we really had to get going. And in that time, I saw the police do so many things. There's a video, I'm sure a lot of people have seen it, where there's protesters laying down on the ground getting pepper sprayed in the face. They were wearing gas masks. They stood in a circle in Bronson Park and just sprayed outward and kept marching. There was so much that went down, so much police brutality. But yeah, that's a false narrative. That is completely a false narrative that the police is pushing. And honestly, I can't convince anybody, but if you go out to one of these protests, you will see exactly what I'm talking about. I've been to 15 in the last 8 days, and every time it's the same thing. The police are never there as friends. They're never there to protect us. They're always there antagonizing the crowd. And simultaneously, we have these white nationalists that have all of a sudden become a huge problem in Kalamazoo. There's arson attacks. I actually, that same night on Monday, ran into a guy with 2 big assault rifles that was there talking about, how the cops are his enemy and these rioters are his enemy. He was just talking about how everyone's his enemy and whatnot. There's reports of someone that was laying in Davis Field with a big backpack just waiting for protesters to come in. And the police, those aren't the people that they were worried about. They were really coming to antagonize us, a group of people of color, mainly, and mostly people under 20, which is also something that I think should be mentioned. They were tear gassing kids.
Yeah. Some reports even say some of the folks down in the park were like wearing class of 2020 shirts. Yeah. So that was almost going to be a separate piece, but I would like to maybe just do a quick little offshoot with you about that. There has been some speculation that these fires are potentially being started by outside fascist groups. It lines up with tactics that people have been reporting on the ground in places like Minneapolis and Chicago. And even on the day of, I have had scattered reports of white people in cars antagonizing. One in particular, they were all in like a minivan. They goofily shouted Black Lives Matter and then like threw a brick at something. Can you speak to, I know besides the things that you just saw, did you detect or see any of that presence, even Monday or even in like some of the other demonstrations?
Yeah, so this whole I don't know what the proper term for it, but the whole narrative that there's people coming from out of town and provoking the sort of rioting and violence, I think is a tool that the police all across the country have been using to brutalize their own people. And on Monday, I definitely everybody I saw was from Kalamazoo. They weren't I knew quite a few of them, and even the ones I didn't recognize, you could tell they didn't come from very far. What that being said, we have had like 6 arson attacks in the last week, and there are reports of suspicious white gentlemen walking around in pickup trucks from out of state. So I definitely think that there is some level of that, but also at the same time, we cannot let that be the narrative.
Right. That's very important to bring up. And kind of a larger issue, a lot of local press and community leaders are trying to put like any property damage or anything outside of like sitting on a sidewalk and kneeling was the work of outside agitators. And I think it's important to point out. I myself, I was in Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids over the weekend, and I know for a fact that any property destruction or looting in GR did not actually start until after the police started firing on the crowd. Even based on that MLive article that just came out, it seems very similar. I think that's a kind of a larger political issue to bring up. Don't use that narrative to somehow discredit protests that elevate to that, because that's a natural expression of anger.
So another thing that I want to directly contradict is what the police actually, I believe they responded to the video of protesters laying down on the floor and pepper spraying them. I was at the scene, and what they say is not what happened. They said that they were chasing that particular group around and then they pepper sprayed them. Well, first of all, they were not violent at any point, so that's not a valid claim. But also, I was at the scene and everybody was running around and everybody was wearing a mask and it was dark, so it's impossible to say that I was specifically chasing this group of 20-year-old kids around in a crowd that was scattered.
All right, and I wanted to mostly focus on the events you saw Monday, but I also just did want to ask you, as somebody who bore witness to these events, what do you think? What would you like to see change in the future? There's been a lot of narratives out there about like the community needs to heal, and the police have kind of stepped back a little bit since Tuesday, notwithstanding a horrific event of excessive policing that happened in the North Side the other night, which we'll also be talking about on the show. But what do you think needs to change in our community to prevent something like this from happening again?
Yeah, this is not something that's new in our communities of color, and that's not just in Kalamazoo, that's all over the place. This is just an issue that has gotten a lot of attention recently, and that pushback has kind of been a catalyst for more police brutality, which is why a lot of people have seen it. But this is stuff that has been going on for forever, just about, and I think it really comes from the fact that policing at its core was something that spawned out of slave catching. It is it's inherently racist. And the only way to change that is to really defund the entire system and start over, abolish policing, and come up with alternate programs for people that have drug issues or nonviolent offenders. The only thing that we really need we don't even need guns. Even tasers would do for someone that's armed. You don't need to shoot every person that you see just because they look like a threat.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story with us. I think it's particularly important right now. Like I said at the top of the show, typically we like to kind of analyze local news. I think in this very specific case, it's very important us just tell the news because both local governments and local media have not really been telling the true story. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and listeners, we'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. So this is part of our interview series about the events that took place Monday and Tuesday in Kalamazoo, particularly with escalated police tactics. The two individuals I'm bringing on right now were present for last Tuesday night. There was a 7 o'clock curfew put down in the city based on the previous night's unrest. And a small gathering of protesters did end up going downtown to peacefully protest said curfew and, of course, for Black Lives Matter. So joining us today are Emily Connor and Skylar Gannon, who were both on the ground when these events transpired. And basically the way this interview is gonna flow, I'm basically just gonna let y'all tell your stories and talk about what happened that day. But first of all, just want to start by asking what motivated you to go downtown that evening, especially with the previous night's events still very fresh in everyone's minds. But we'll start with you, Skylar, and then I'll pose that same question to you, Emily.
That's a big question. I think, if anything, the night before was what solidified that I had to go down that day. There was something uniquely unsettling about watching the police tear gas children that were laying face down on the ground. I didn't feel like I had a choice. Like I had to go do something. I couldn't do nothing. I felt an absolute moral obligation to offer any level of involvement or protection that I could.
Emily, same question.
On the one hand, similar to what Skylar said, just watching what happened the night before on the live feed and feeling, I don't know, having to watch that and be powerless to do anything about it. I really wasn't in the mood for any more inaction, so just on an ideological basis, I wanted to be there in support of what was happening, but also just wanted to be there just to document anything going on so there would be a record of it.
Speaking of anything going on, now, of course, the biggest reason for this special episode, we saw riot tactics used by the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety in a very overt and public way that is somewhat novel in the city of Kalamazoo, especially if you're downtown and let's be frank, not black. But I wanted to kind of cement a timetable for those listening who may not have been down there. So we're looking at this day of kind of peaceful protests downtown following the evening that happened the night before. About when did you find yourselves downtown, and what was going on when you arrived?
My cohort and I, as we got through downtown, had a uniquely challenging time of getting to where any conglomeration of people was happening, because every time we came to a major artery of Kalamazoo, we were face to face with standing National Guard troops and Humvees, and we really had to kind of like Metal Gear Solid our way through downtown to get to where these people were. I finally ended up seeing where people were because of Emily's live stream. It was clear that you could see that chunk of West Michigan that was stretched down there. And so after some very interesting espionage-adjacent tactics to get there, I think that the vast majority of people probably all ended up around 6:30, 6:45, just kind of lumping into the space where everyone stayed until I think about 7:45 is when they opened fire. We were given a handful of warnings.
Just a little bit of context, or maybe those out of town who weren't down there that night. Essentially, the National Guard had completely encircled the area around downtown and Bronson Park, more or less from Lovell all the way down towards John Street, and then really just like completely encircled around. One could almost say they were kind of kettling folks in a huge multi-block box. So Emily, as Skylar mentioned, you'd gotten down there a little bit earlier. When did you start seeing, or I guess like what was happening when you got down there? Did you start seeing like a buildup of police presence? Were they, did you see them in the riot gear right away, or did that kind of build up towards 7 o'clock?
I'm trying to remember. It definitely built towards 7 o'clock. They rolled out more, a bigger presence as I think they realized we weren't planning to disperse. I got there a little bit before. I did still have to take some interesting alternative routes to get down there because they blocked off a lot of streets. But at least by 7, pretty much people had concentrated in the intersection and were already at kind of in a face-off situation with the police. So there were the cops in riot gear plus the National Guard sort of lining up, and I was really surprised at how much of them there actually were. Usually there's more protesters than police. I think we were pretty evenly matched this time.
So speaking of which, and both of you feel free to answer this, but about how many people were there, by the time we saw police weapons, and what was the general like mood or sense of the crowd? I have seen some footage and photos of people kind of kneeling on the ground. And I wanted to see, like, did it seem like you had a large contingent of people more or less just committing civil disobedience against the 7 o'clock order? Was there anything, if you were to put your devil's advocate hat on, that you could point to? It's like, oh, yeah, they totally should have used chemical weapons on people. But,
I legitimately don't think that there is a possible devil's advocate position to take. While there certainly was a marked escalation, specifically on behalf of the police department, there was very little in the way of behavior from the protesters that would elicit that kind of violent response. Really, there just was none. It was truly a just peaceful group of people, and they were loud and they were angry and they were shouting things at the police, but it wasn't. There was no inciting incident outside of when the police themselves opened fire. And granted, there were maybe 50, 60 protesters in this little chunk of downtown. Hard to count the number of police and National Guard that were there, but there was, I would argue, there was a disparity between the two. I felt much more of a police presence than I did of a protester presence.
Emily?
Yeah, I would echo that. I don't think there's a case to be made for the actions of the police. Everyone was peaceful, certainly keyed up, definitely had some things to get off their chest, so to speak, but especially the organizers had everything very well under control. We didn't even have any of the typical outliers trying to start stuff. And the protesters in sort of the front line or two went out of their way to make it very obvious to the police that they were entirely peaceful, had no intention of doing anything disruptive. At one point, yes, a lot of them were actually taking a knee with their hands in the air. You
The
know.
police, you mean? Or
No, the protesters.
Protesters.
There was also lots of talk from the protesters, and there was a very clear, like, if you put your down right now. Ooh, sorry, I just remember that.
Oh, don't worry about that. We can edit it out. Yeah.
You know, it was very clear that, like, if you walk away from this violence that you're implying by standing here in riot gear, like, we can all walk together. Like, we'll go home if you go home. Like, that this was all very clearly communicated from the top down. And like Emily said, it was very well organized prior to kind of like the inciting incidents of the thing. The general feeling of the crowd wasn't even particularly aggressive. At least in comparison to, you know, like I watched footage from like Seattle or New York, and you could tell that this crowd just is very full of vitriol, very, very fueled up. And that kind of wasn't the feeling of this crowd. If anything, this crowd felt nearly heartbroken, I think, if anything else. I think it was a bunch of people who, for the first time in their lives, had seen this kind of thing happen in their backyards to children, to actual children. And I think that was kind of the purveying sensation with everybody. It was just this heartache to watch this thing happen.
So, moving a little bit forward now. So, we have that tension. It's right around 7 o'clock. This is when the curfew order is supposed to take place. You know, there's some footage of, like, assistant chief of police on site, you know, dropping a knee and talking to the protesters.
There was lots of lip service.
Yes.
There's tons of lip service.
So I wanted to get kind of just like that timetable of what was the communication between the protesters and the police at that moment. What were the police saying, and you know, what was their you know, what was there a warning that they were going to use police weapons, or did they just kind of unleash onto the crowd?
To the best of my memory, to put together a super tight timeline of what was happening. They pulled aside one of the main organizers, a young woman who had been kind of being the voice for the protest, and they pulled her aside for quite a while. I think it was like 20 minutes, something like that. And when they returned her to us, after that they pretty much they just kind of said, well, you're 20 minutes past curfew, you have 30 seconds to disperse. And then that kept being repeated, and at one point he changed mid-sentence and said, oh, it's 15 now, you know. And yes, they explicitly said, I have it on video, if you don't disperse, you're going to get tear gas. That's what's going to happen.
Skylar, anything to add to that? We're talking about like the lead up to the actual use of riot gear and disposals.
Yeah, there certainly was a handful of moments where the assistant police chief reiterated this: we are X amount of time past curfew, and if you don't leave now, these will be the repercussions. There was also a moment where he said something along the lines of, you all also are breaking the stay-at-home order, which, if I'm not wrong, I believe was lifted the day prior to all of this happening. So that was just like false information. But yeah, there were a handful of steps. I would say 7:20, everyone starts to realize that this can and probably will turn a little bit of violent. 7:30,
violence from the police.
Correct. Yeah. No, there was zero act of aggressive provocation on behalf of the protesters. The only thing anyone did, quote unquote, wrong was that they were out after curfew. Which is nonsense and fascism. And so around 7:30, the not assistant police chief says some more stuff. There's a little bit of a photo op moment where there's some kneeling, and within the next 15 minutes, it felt like a blink, really. There was like nothing there was no marked moment, just suddenly there was tear gas all over the place. And so there was like an initial drop of tear gas, and everyone kind of pulled back a little bit, but hadn't quite dispersed yet. And so there was this initial aggression on behalf of the police, and then we all kind of moved backwards about 25 feet and held that huddle and that stayed for maybe another 10 minutes before the police just, went full commando and opened fire on everybody. It pushed the entire crowd far, far back, long after, people are walking away with their backs to them, and they're still getting hit with rubber bullets and shooting tear gas. I believe the number they used was 10 canisters for the 60 people who were in, not a very large area. It was very much overkill.
I'm just going to interject before I hand it to Emily. Something distressing that I'm hearing from some government officials is they're trying to contend that they did not use rubber bullets that night. It's now, granted, obviously some sort of projectile was used. They're trying to kind of...
I would be very curious to know what it was that shot my body several times if it wasn't rubber bullets.
But they were using munitions, projectiles on people. That is undeniable.
I'm still walking around with noticeable wounds.
But there's, I believe they might have been using pepper ball rounds. By the time this goes to air, I'll have that specific.
By the look of the gun the one cop was holding, that's what I would assume it looked a lot like a paintball gun. But those things, especially at close range, are, really damaging.
So Skylar, you already ran down a little bit, and Emily, to the best of your recollection, once things started going down, any specific recollections from you, things to add to kind of what Skylar witnessed?
Let's see. After the initial tear gas, it was, people did pull back a ways, mostly cleared out of the actual intersection. We're kind of lined up along two sides of it. A couple people got it pretty bad. They were being assisted by medics, etc. The wind was kind of also blowing it into us some more, so it was kind of difficult to find somewhere to stand where you weren't getting it all up in your throat. I think what shocked me was once they busted out the tear gas, the crowd was pretty much, okay, we're getting out of here, and they were still coming. And it was this surreal moment of looking around the parking lot and realize these guys are closing in on us still. They're still chasing us through the neighborhood, and we were way out of the intersection that they told us to vacate.
For context, if anyone who wasn't there doesn't understand the layout of the city fully, we were pushed for about a full block and a half from where this started. It was very... there was a moment where it was a little terrifying. Like, how far are they going to push us back, and what is the point to this continued pushing this line back further and further?
All right, so I'll just kind of close out. So Skylar, you already mentioned that you actually did get hit with police weaponry, and maybe if you could just describe a little bit more, where you got hit, how it felt, and just...
One got my right arm, kind of right behind my bicep, and there was a moment where I wasn't sure whether or not that was a rubber bullet, because it felt like I got shot, and it kind of put my arm out of commission for a couple of days. One hit the right side of my chest, which was also terrifying, and resulted in some very uncomfortable breathing for a couple of days. And then there are two somewhere on my back that felt pretty awful as well. Also, inhaling tear gas wasn't my favorite thing that happened that day.
Oh, yeah. For those at home, and there's been a lot of discussion about tear gas and all that. Some of you now, it is a war crime, and many of you out in the community now have firsthand experience with it. But just for those who have not, tear gas is not mildly uncomfortable. It feels, and this is kind of the best analogy I can use to describe it. It feels like somebody pulling hot charcoals off the grill, and then you are being forced to gargle them in your throat for several minutes. It is extremely unpleasant. It's an irritant, and particularly during a respiratory pandemic, is extremely.
Not only because of people, already potentially finding it difficult to breathe, but because of what that does to a crowd, everyone is now coughing on each other.
Absolutely.
Everyone is, trying to flush their system and get air. They're not, everyone who's probably masked up, well, you're not worrying about wearing a mask anymore if you've already been tear gassed, so you're probably not wearing that anymore. You're coughing, and it's... I also saw some people on social media circulating this idea that no tear gas was used, that was overreaction, or people not knowing what they were... Trust me, it was tear gas. If you've been tear gassed, you know what that's like. There's no mistake.
It was not smoke bombs.
It was,
No.
it was not paint cans. It was not pepper spray. It was full-blown tear gas.
All right. Well, I want to thank both of you for taking the time to describe your experiences.
Defund the police!
Yes, there you go. Any other thoughts, Emily? It sounds like Skylar gave his closing statement, but...
Well, one other thing, I don't know if this is of note, but as we were kind of running out of there and trying to get home, because at this point it's like they're definitely still coming after us, best thing we can try to do is get to somewhere safe. Some of the protesters dispersing, particularly the people of color, works. I ran into one guy who was. We were both trying to find a way to cut over to the other street, and I started to go down an alley, and he was telling me, "Oh, you can't get through there. I just tried." And so we were walking together, and he told me, young black guy, he was concerned because what he was wearing was very noticeable, and he said he'd already had 3 different cop cars slow down and kind of really eyeball him as he was trying to walk and get out of there. And so we wound up walking. He lived a street over from me, so we walked back together just for safety. But that kind of, because you know what, they weren't slowing down as they passed me, and I still had masks and bandanas and stuff on. I'd clearly come from the protest, and it's wow, just listening to that, like, yeah, right here in this town, this is still happening. Great.
I think that I'll just break off on a point. While it's heavily traumatic to experience those police weapons, I think that what you just said really hones in on the point. Like, don't forget what these protests were about. And again, the Kalamazoo Public Safety Department has been brutalizing our black community, our communities of colors, long before they started using tear gas and rubber bullets or pepper bullets, whatever they want to say. So again, I want to thank y'all both for taking some time out to be interviewed for the show. Bless you both, and thank you for standing up for the community.
The following is an anonymous testimonial about the events of June 2nd. The individual in question telling the story asked to remain anonymous. As a typical degenerate millennial, I woke up on Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. It was my first day off in a week of overtime, and as such, I had planned on having no plans or commitments that day. By the time I had showered and checked my social media, it was apparent that Kalamazoo had declared a curfew and was in the process of dispersing the peaceful protesters downtown. My most immediate outrage was at the curfew, since it was already after 7 p.m. and I could not legally leave my home. After a few minutes of checking local news at about 7:15 p.m., my mother called. She excitedly warned me that we're watching the news and there's a group of protesters marching down Westridge towards your neighborhood. Stay inside, be safe, and don't go out to join them. Pretty standard mother stuff, full of concern for my safety. I immediately put my shoes on and headed outside, inviting one of my neighbors to walk with me to the corner of Westridge and see what was going on. When we got to Westridge, it was clear that a reported march was in fact just dozens of small groups of protesters dispersing and heading home after being tear gassed and run off by the police. I passed a neighbor of mine, eyes still red, who asked for a cigarette, relayed to me the police use of tear gas and the senselessness of their actions. My neighbors proceeded home, while I determined to see just what the hell was going on in my city. I headed north. On Dutton, I found a group of some 15 young protesters who were determined to head back downtown. We headed to Park Street, and from there went directly north towards the Peace Zone cordon, which surrounded downtown. On our brief march north, we encountered no police, but we could see a barricade manned by 8 National Guard soldiers, with a mine-resistant vehicle blocking 2 lanes of Park Street. We stopped our approach about 15 meters south of Lovell, where the National Guard had set up their barricade. There were a few organized chants of "no justice, no peace, no racist police," and calls for the police and National Guard to put down their weapons and join us. Apparently, this was intimidating, because within 5 minutes of our arrival at Lovell, 3 police vehicles, 2 Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety SUVs, and a large unmarked white van were allowed past the barricade with reinforcements. Very quickly, we went from demonstrating in front of 8 National Guardsmen and 2 to 3 police officers to drawing a crowd of approximately a dozen police. One KPS vehicle was pulled forward, or KDPS vehicle was pulled forward with a bullhorn, and the police announced, "You are violating curfew. If you do not return home, you'll immediately be arrested." A few minutes passed. Nothing happened. Emboldened, some of the protesters had been creeping closer to the corner of Lovell itself. The police repeated the same warning a second time. Immediately after their second warning, a silver Chrysler van, the one you saw soccer moms driving in the mid-2000s, approached us down Lovell at high speed. The van turned erratically onto Park, going against the flow of traffic, and pulled alongside the protesters on the east corner of Lovell. 2 police in riot gear flung the side door open and leapt out to grab one of the more vocal protesters. At the same time, and with no additional warning, the police at the barricade charged towards the protesters. We scattered, with most of the protesters fleeing southeast to the small residential buildings south of Reese Court. The image that sticks in my mind as I ran was seeing 3 officers rushing single file after one African-American girl, while in the background a National Guard Humvee pulled forward from behind the City Hall, flanked by riot police on foot, and rolled through the parking lot of St. Luke's Episcopal Church, also in apparent pursuit. I fled south down Park, turning west on Cedar Street. Whether it was because of my privileged skin color or because the police didn't feel like running too far, I was not pursued beyond the south side of the Civic Theater and was able to simply speed walk away after a brief flight. The time was around 7:45 p.m. Incensed, I continued walking an erratic path through the Vine neighborhood for the next 2 hours, determined to continue seeing what I could see. I encountered other groups of disorganized protesters in a number of areas throughout the Vine, but without leadership and in face of such a disproportionate show of force, most had the fight taken out of them and they dispersed gently towards home. The most common wish on everyone's lips that night was for you to be safe. Water, snacks, and medical supplies were freely offered. I used the privilege of my skin color to pace up and down Park and Westnedge several times, being passed by roving patrols of Kalamazoo County sheriffs, traveling 4 vehicles in line. I was twice instructed to return to my home, but these officers did not threaten arrest, even when I tried to explain that Bagel Beanery and all the other donut shops were closed because of the curfew. At one point, I sheltered in an aid station set up by the protesters, where I saw a young man who had been burned by a tear gas canister. Everywhere there were small groups of neighbors outside, watching the police patrols go by, hanging out signs of support, and generally bearing witness to this extraordinary night. Gradually, the noise emanating from downtown became quieter. I began to pass less and less other people in the street. I saw the police pull over a vehicle on Westnedge and ticket its driver for violating curfew. I began to feel more and more conspicuous on foot and alone, and began to gravitate towards home. I made it to my block by about 9:45 p.m. By that point, the side of the city had descended into an eerie silence, punctuated only by the wailing of ambulances and police sirens heading north. I stayed outside, listening and taking the night in until well after 11. I spoke with a volunteer medic and listened on the phone as her friend, also a medic, attempted to head north towards the fires erupting across town. Eventually, exhausted, I locked my doors for the night, resolving to head out to the protest scheduled the next day. Curfew be damned. And just one thing to add, as we all know, the next day the curfew was lifted. And following the events of June 2nd, we haven't seen significant police escalation